welcome back. Today we are joined by Debi Bryk, board-certified holistic nutritionist who specializes in gut health, autoimmune conditions, functional genomics, and stress management. This is a special follow-up to our August Q&A. Debi will be answering the questions we didn't get to last time, covering supplements and testing, diet and nutrition, hormone health, family genetics, and more. Welcome, Debi.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm happy to do this. There was so many questions, great questions that came in. We actually even went over the time that we planned on for the last Q&A, so we'll be doing another one, which I'm pretty excited about too. Okay, how do you support the person after the results are received? Is there a follow-up? So the test is designed to be really easy to understand. So if you follow the test with the symptoms, it shows potential causes, dietary, lifestyle, and supplement recommendations, and it's actually in order of importance. So if you follow starting in page 1 and make the changes going through, many times people start to feel better even before they get to the advanced section. So there's the foundational section that you start with, and then the core section, and then the advanced section. But that being said, if you do suffer from any health issues, it would be beneficial for you to work with a knowledgeable, functional, or holistic healthcare practitioner. And you can find a list of practitioners on the MaxGen's website they use the test in their practice. They're very well versed in it. We also have a private Facebook group where we post educational information, as well as the MaxGen's YouTube channel. Do you recommend a medical provider to assist? Again, what I just said, if you have a lot of issues, it's actually a good idea. If people just basically want to know how to keep themselves healthy, many people can do that on their own, but it's always great to have guidance from a functional medicine practitioner. Can I delete my information after, and how can I know it is done? So your DNA is destroyed. MaxGen owns the equipment, so they have total control of everything. There's no third-party lab involved. There's no selling of your DNA. So you can feel very secure knowing that it's not going to get out there. As far as your results, your test results can be deleted. You would have to sign a waiver stating that you understand that if you ask them to delete your information and you lose your test results, you would have to retest because there's no way they could pull it up. But you're in the system as a number, and you can even use a fake name. Like Chad says, they have about 1,000 SpongeBobs in the system. So, and like when I work with practitioners, I can't even pull it up by a name. I have to have the sample ID or the vial number. My results indicated that I would do best with a Mediterranean diet, and a paleo diet was runner-up. I have celiac disease and avoid all grains. I also don't tolerate high amounts of fructose or moderate amounts of liquid fats. You spoke about the carnivore diet aligning with genes. What are your suggestions for me and my diet? So what's great about a carnivore way of eating is that it removes pretty much anything that could be potentially inflammatory or reactive for people. It's mainly animal protein, so it may work well for you, and it includes fats from butter, ghee, and tallow, which are not liquid fats. They're more of a solid at room temperature. And it includes eggs, which egg yolks are a great source of phosphatidylcholine. They're one of the best food sources of choline, and some people genetically are predisposed to low levels of choline, and choline actually helps to break down fats in the liver. What do you do when a couple of genes contradict each other? For example, I need more cruciferous vegetables for estrogen detox due to slow COMT, but also sulfur sensitive. What do I prioritize? So there's a couple things you can do. First of all, it's only if the gene is expressing. So remember, our genetics are not diagnostic. They're a predisposition. So sometimes we can have variants, but the gene is functioning fine, so it's not giving us symptoms. Secondly, if you do have symptoms of sulfite sensitivity, taking a high dose molybdenum supplement prior to high sulfur meals can help break it down and prevent symptoms. So if you feel fine eating cruciferous vegetables, then definitely consume them. That gene is probably not expressing. If it is, taking an extra supplement of molybdenum may help. And as for hormones, if you're sensitive to sulfur, ground flaxseed's a great option. 2 tablespoons a day can help increase good estrogen, which crowds out the bad estrogen. And then it's really important to avoid hormone disrupting chemicals in body products and household cleaning products. You have to think of your skin as one big giant mouth. So whatever you put on your skin is going to be absorbed into the bloodstream within 22 seconds. So if you wouldn't eat it, you don't want to put it on your skin, and not in a taste sense, but in a chemical sense. So I love to recommend the Environmental Working Group, their website, and they have an app called EWG Healthy Living, where you can actually scan the barcodes of body products and household cleaning products to see if there's hormone disruptors in there, carcinogens, things like that, and then trying to consume as much organic as possible, because the herbicides and pesticides are all hormone disruptors as well. If you have both FUT2 variants and can have a false elevation of B12 levels, how do you know your actual levels? What is the urine test with your doctor? So, what they're talking about is when you have a homozygous variant in the FUT2 gene, you're considered a non-secretor. And if you listen to the first webinar, we talked about that a little bit more. But this is one gene that you cannot change the expression of. You're either born a secretor or you're born a non-secretor. And this can cause falsely elevated serum B12 levels up to 20%. So if you only have serum B12 to go by, then you want to reduce it by about 20%. And that's a little bit more accurate number. The urine test that I was talking about is called methylmalonic acid, or MMA. If MMA is elevated, that signifies low intracellular B12. Also homocysteine. If your homocysteine is elevated and optimal levels are 5 to 7, if it's over 7, that could signify low B12, folate, and or B6. So that's also a good test to do. Which gene for dairy and BMI? That would be the APOA2 gene. But if you have that, and I've had clients with this where they were rock stars with exercise and eating high protein, doing really great on their diet and lifestyle, but they loved their dairy and they couldn't lose weight. And when we ran their genetics, they had that gene. And by taking out the high fat dairy, they actually started losing weight immediately. I had a MaxGen test done several years ago. I'm here to decide if I should take HRT based on my results. It says if you are female, you have a genetic variant associated with increased levels of 4-OH estradiol, which can be highly reactive. You should evaluate 4-OH estradiol levels yearly and seek appropriate medical intervention if needed. So I always recommend consulting with a functional medicine practitioner and getting a 24-hour saliva or urine hormone testing before taking any hormone replacement therapy for 2 reasons. Number 1, you may not need it. Number 2, if you're at risk for blood clots, it might not be safe for you. So you want to make sure that you're doing that safely. I started getting a hormone pellet. It worked for a couple sessions and now I feel worse. What are your thoughts about hormone replacement pellets? So it's possibly an incorrect dosage. It's very important to monitor levels with your doctor or functional medicine practitioner. Many times we can balance hormones naturally. I've seen this a lot with dietary and lifestyle changes. Some of the tips I just mentioned a little minute ago: avoiding the xenoestrogens, pesticides, herbicides, chemicals in body products, a healthy diet, including healthy fats, cruciferous vegetables, exercise, optimal sleep, stress management. So many things we can do naturally for hormones. But again, I would see a functional doctor and make sure that you need it. And supplements like magnesium, vitamin D, zinc, DIM, which is a compound found in cruciferous vegetables, and calcium D-glucarate can also be effective. And they help balance hormones naturally. It's not synthetic. My 9-year-old child has ADHD, Tourette syndrome, and developed severe seizures in the past year, likely metabolic hormonal imbalances. Genetic results show multiple mutations, COMT very fast, DAO homozygous, MAOB homozygous, MTHFR heterozygous, PEMT homozygous. How might her very fast comp activity connect with her ADHD, Tourette's, and seizures in the context of her mutations? So histamine intolerance due to reduced DAO function can cause a multitude of symptoms because histamine runs throughout our entire body. So the first thing I would recommend is a low histamine diet. Work on gut health with targeted probiotics. A fast comp, as stated on the test, may result in low levels of dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, resulting in mood disorders. She's also predisposed to low phosphatidylcholine levels. Low levels of phosphatidylcholine are linked to the incidence and severity of ADHD, autism, and Alzheimer's. And one of the best food sources of choline is pastured egg yolks. It's also in beef liver, beef, fish, chicken, but when there's a high need for it, supplementing can be very beneficial. And oxidative stress plays a huge role in disease progression. So genetic variants in the glutathione genes, SOD1 and SOD2, need to be addressed. You may want to also consider testing her for mold toxicity and Lyme disease. Seeing a functional medicine practitioner for this child would be really helpful because they would know which direction to go to help your child. I've seen people heal from all of these issues that your child has. I got my whole family and kids tested with the work, such good info, but I feel overwhelmed with where to start with specific issues each kid is dealing with, like acne, focus, emotions, allergies. Where do I start? And can I schedule a consult with an expert to help my kids and myself? Again, you want to start with the foundational section of the test. The test is in order. It's really designed so that if you follow it in order without skipping ahead, that you many times will see improvements before you even get to the advanced section. So starting with making sure they're sleeping, their diet, gut health, and oxidative stress, getting rid of the chemicals and the toxins, all of that is huge for helping with all of these issues that you mentioned, and then moving on from there. But as far as a consult, again, I recommend going to the website, and there's so many practitioners to choose from on there that are amazing, and most of them do work remotely, so it doesn't matter where you live. You can find a practitioner that can help you. Can you please expand upon, clarify methyl donor sensitivity and symptoms? We did the works for our family, and my children, 6 and 3, are compound heterozygous for C677T and A1298C variants, but results state likely tolerant and take as needed. So people with a slow COMT can be sensitive to methylated Bs, which would be outlined on the test. Your children should not have any issues with the methylated Bs. If they had the slow comp, it would say they could be sensitive. But it's always best to get as much of the nutrients they need from food, and then starting really low and slow with methylation. And again, addressing the toxins, the gut health, and the oxidative stress prior to throwing a bunch of methylated Bs at anyone, because if they're very toxic, there's a lot of oxidative stress. Whether they're sensitive to the methylated Bs or not, it can backfire. So starting really low and slow also with those is advised as well. You don't want to mega dose anything right from the get-go. You want to clean up the diet and environment first, and then go from there. What gene vitamin D do you see with spectrum kids? So as far as vitamin D, the test tests for 4 SNPs related to vitamin D. Actually, there's 2 genes, and then the CYP2R1, as well as 3 VDR SNPs. The CYP2R1 is the primary enzyme in activating vitamin D, converting it from its dietary or skin producing form into the active hormone form. The one, which is 1,25 dihydroxyvitamin D3. Individuals with variants in this gene may not respond well to supplemental vitamin D and might need higher doses. Therefore, monitoring not just 25 OH2D, but 1,25 OH vitamin D is beneficial. So asking their pediatrician to test for both of those can be helpful to make sure that they're actually getting that active form of vitamin D. And also, you need sufficient magnesium because vitamin D cannot be metabolized without sufficient magnesium. So I always start with magnesium supplementation even before I add in vitamin D. And because of what they've done to our planet and soil erosion, magnesium, has taken the biggest hit. So when they tested nutrients in food, the level of magnesium in food today is significantly less than it was in like the 1970s. So it's estimated that pretty much we all need to supplement with magnesium. Even if you're eating foods that are considered high in magnesium, many times people need more. Once a disease gene is turned on, can you turn it off? Yes, it's possible to improve the function of a gene SNP with dietary and lifestyle changes. Genes can increase our risk, but it's not diagnostic. So improving our diet, lifestyle, and environment, we can essentially improve the functions of our genes so that they don't cause us issues. The only gene, like I mentioned before, that we cannot change the expression of is the FUT2 non-secretor gene, but there's dietary and supplement things we can do so that we don't have issues, which I talked about in the first webinar. So I highly recommend listening to that if you guys didn't, with Dr. Chad and I. What is the meaning of AA, GG, AG, CG, CC, TT, etc.? So those are alleles. Alleles are a variant form of a gene that are located at the same position or genetic locus on a chromosome. Basically, a codon is a specific sequence of 3 nucleotide bases in DNA or RNA that provide instructions for building proteins. Alleles are essentially different versions or variations of a gene, and these variations are due to differences in the sequence of nucleotides at a specific location or locus on the DNA molecule. So this changes the protein, which changes the function depending on its location. So then that's where we get the SNP, and that's where we can have symptoms if the gene is expressing. What do the AATT mean? The minor column. So the minor allele frequency refers to the frequency of the less common allele at a specific genetic location within a population. So it essentially quantifies how often the second most frequent allele appears in a group of individuals. Can you elaborate on lithium orotate and APOE SNP? So APOE, so APOE is the risk for Alzheimer's disease. E3, is considered normal average risk for Alzheimer's. When there's an E3, E4, so one of them is not an E3, it's an E4, that increases the risk of Alzheimer's. And then E4 would increase that risk even more. So lithium orotate has been shown to improve symptoms of ADHD, autism, and Alzheimer's. There's studies on it. In fact, recent studies show that levels of lithium were significantly reduced in the prefrontal cortex of people with mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. And in a mouse model of Alzheimer's disease, a low-dose lithium salt in the diet reversed memory loss and prevented cognitive decline in aging mice. So it's pretty exciting. We've kind of known this in the functional medicine world for a while, but now there's studies confirming it. How long can you take lithium orotate? So this hasn't been established yet, so you'd want to consult your practitioner. Debbie said MTHFD1 folate doesn't get into cells. I am homozygous for this gene. What blood test helps test folate? Have you heard of the FRAT test for folate antibodies? So MTHFD1 can impair folate metabolism. But it's actually the SLC19A1 gene that can cause potential reduction in folate transport, resulting in intracellular folate deficiency. There's also two other genes that can affect folate metabolism. The one is FOLR1, which can increase the risk of low cerebral folate or brain levels of folate, and FOLH1, that one has to do with cellular or intestinal absorption of folate. So variants in any one of these three genes can affect folate metabolism, obviously, along with MTHFR. The blood test that you would want to get would be an RBC folate test. When we test serum, it only tests what's floating around in the blood, where RBC folate will tell us if it's getting into the cell. Now, that's not going to measure cerebral folate levels or brain levels of folate. That FRAT test, that actually helps identify antibodies against the folate receptor, which can indicate cerebral folate deficiency. Prior to this, the only way to test for cerebral folate deficiency was with a spinal tap, because that's how folate is transported into the brain, is through spinal fluid. Cerebral folate deficiency is seen in up to 70% of autistic children, and folinic acid has been shown to improve symptoms. So folinic acid is a good choice to improve folate levels in the brain, but so is methylfolate, because I want to point out that if you're homozygous for MTHFS, so this isn't MTHFR, this is MTHFS, and only if you're homozygous, so it's a recessive gene, so you need to have two copies, one from mom and one from dad, then you actually should avoid folinic acid, because there's a few studies in the US and in Europe, although they're small, have shown that folinic acid can actually lower folate levels in the brain. So I always recommend avoiding folinic acid as well as synthetic folic acid whenever there's any of these variants, because synthetic folic acid also can prevent folate absorption via folate trapping, it's called. So it actually blocks folate receptors so that you cannot get folate into the cell from your food. So if there is a variant, a homozygous variant MTHFS, then choose methylated Bs, starting low and slow, and increase folate-rich foods. So folate is an essential vitamin for proper growth and neurological function. Folate receptor antibodies do fluctuate from time to time. This may be attributed to diet, especially exposure to dairy, or immune response at the time of testing. So if the FRAT test is initially negative and there are still symptoms present, it may be recommended to retest in the future. And it's also recommended to avoid dairy and synthetic folic acid in fortified foods and supplements with anyone with MTHFR or any of these variants. How does MTHFD1 affect MTHFR? Well, variants in this gene can cause metabolic syndrome. And like I said earlier, just before, it can impair folate metabolism. And it has with variable features, including high homocysteine, metablastic anemia, and weakened immune system. So you want to, again, avoid synthetic folic acid in supplements and fortified foods. And support for this gene to improve symptoms would be B12 in the form of hydroxycobalamin, betaine, and folinic acid, or methylfolate if folinic acid is not the best choice for that person. And while we're on this subject too, I just want to mention B12 plays a huge role as well. It's been shown that, especially in nonverbal autistic children, they have very low levels of B12. And so hydroxycobalamin sometimes needs to be used as injections instead of orally, can really help these children to start speaking again. And even with folate, you may need to do injections, might be better, especially if there's a lot of variants and they can't convert it or absorb it. MTHFR A1298C hetero, what does this mean? So it actually states on the test, this can result in a minimal reduction, 20%, in MTHFR enzyme activity. So depending on which variant you have, and whether it's homozygous, heterozygous, compound heterozygous, can result anywhere in up to a 20% to 75% loss of the conversion of dietary folate into methylfolate. So essentially, you think of it this way: if you have this meal in front of you that's full of folate rich foods, and for this person who's just hetero A1298C, it's minimal, 20% of the folate from that meal they might not convert if this gene's expressing into a usable form of folate like methylfolate. But somebody who is homozygous for C677T, that can be like up to 70% reduction. So this is where the problem can come in, because MTHFR is our master methylation gene, responsible for DNA synthesis and repair, neurotransmitter production, white blood cell count, red blood cell count, platelet formation and maturation, detoxification from toxins, and from homocysteine. It converts homocysteine to methionine. So this is why this is a big deal, but there's also several other genes that can affect folate metabolism as well. So we have to look at the whole methylation pathway, which this test does. I have both PEMTs with the other MTHFR mutation. What do you recommend? So I highly recommend supplementing with phosphatidylcholine. Choosing like sunflower, derived from sunflower, not soy, is what I recommend, because some companies will use soy as their source for choline. But I recommend sunflower, so high quality one there. And you can buy it, get it in powder form, capsule, and even liquid. And then again, food sources would be pastured eggs, liver, beef, fish, even potatoes have some. And then you also want to avoid synthetic folic acid in fortified foods and supplements with MTHFR. I have low dopamine, very low norepinephrine, epinephrine, and struggle with daily migraines for over 2 years. Do you have any thoughts? I also have MTHFR, C677T, but all related blood work is in good standing, folate and homocysteine. So low dopamine, low norepinephrine. Sounds like you have a fast COMT, which can cause low levels of those neurotransmitters and can also cause headaches and lack of motivation and depression. I would also look at histamine intolerance, but the fast comp, you'd want to increase protein. Bacoba, which is an herb, can be helpful. Vitamin C, balancing copper, just making sure your copper zinc ratio is good. Methylation, so your B vitamins, and also consider looking into maybe histamine intolerance, which that would not show up on blood work, but can cause also a lot of those symptoms, because histamine runs throughout our whole body. So it can affect gut, lungs, skin, entire cardiovascular system, migraines, headaches, brain fog, everything pretty much. Neuropathy, it can cause many, many symptoms. So look at that part on your test as well, the histamine page. And then again, the folate, you want to make sure you're asking for an RBC folate test, because serum could end up looking normal and you potentially intracellularly, you might not have enough. How can you increase serotonin naturally? My husband is on supplements, but I don't think they're working. This can be due to a fast MAOA. So increasing protein, omega-3s, nuts and seeds, methylation. You need to keep in mind that amino acids are the building blocks of our cells and help produce neurotransmitters, along with the B vitamins, vitamin D, omega-3s, the monounsaturated fats from like eggs, meat, olive oil, avocado, nuts and seeds, and magnesium. So we get a lot of this stuff from our diet. I know from me personally, I suffered from depression my whole life. And when I greatly increased my protein, and I do making sure get enough B vitamins too, as well, and magnesium, all my mood issues went away. Like I don't even get mood issues anymore. It's crazy, but it's amazing. So it's great. But I did want to make a note that if you decide to try amino acids or herbs like adaptogens, like the bacoba and things like that, if you're on any medications for anxiety or depression or ADHD or anything like that, you really need to consult with your physician, because there can be contraindications, because many of those nutrients, especially amino acids, can increase neurotransmitters naturally. So if you're on meds to do that, it can actually cause like serotonin syndrome and things like that. So always check for contraindications. Suox, please spell the thing that you recommend taking to counteract. Okay, so the homozygous Suox gene and even the CBS gene, if there's variants there, can potentially cause sulfite and sulfur sensitivity, and that was molybdenum. And you spell that Molybdenum. Took me years to learn how to say this word, I got to tell you. And it was the same thing when I heard a practitioner say it, I'm like, molybdenum, what the heck is that? How do you spell that? It's a weird spelling for sure. What is the best test to check histamine levels? There actually is no proven way to test for histamine intolerance, and testing histamine in the blood is generally not considered accurate or reliable. So genetic testing is the best way to test to see if it's a genetic reason why you have potential histamine intolerance, and then symptoms, going by your symptoms, and then a trial of a low histamine diet is the best way to determine if you have an issue with histamine intolerance. The other things that can cause histamine intolerance would be mast cell activation syndrome, leaky gut, SIBO, and even like if you have, well, leaky gut, so like a lot of oxidative stress and gut issues because that histamine is leaking. When you have, your gut is that protective layer in your GI tract, the mucosal lining is supposed to prevent like food particles to getting out into the bloodstream and even environmental to get in. So when you have a compromised gut called leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability, it allows not only environmental toxins, but also proteins from food and histamines to leak into the bloodstream, and it's not supposed to be there, and it causes an immune response. And that's where we can end up with food sensitivities that we never had before. But the good news is that when it's a sensitivity, many times when you clean up the diet environment, heal the gut, you can go back to eating those foods without issue. Allergies a little different, but sensitivities many times can be resolved by healing and getting rid of the inflammation and healing the gut. So key takeaways. Genes are like a blueprint. Lifestyle and environment shapes the results. Just like I was saying, it's most of our issues are caused by our diet, our lifestyle, environment, stress, lack of sleep. And so cleaning those things up and based on like where our weaknesses might be genetically, that's where the genetic test comes in, that blueprint, so that you know the direction to go instead of guessing. Start with the basics. Start with the foundational changes before you get to the advanced. And many times, like I said, when I work with clients that way, many times we don't even have to do mega dose of things. We don't have to go that route because they're already feeling so much better. And it saves them so much time, aggravation, and even money, because all the tests that we were thinking of doing later on, we don't have to do because they're feeling better. Your report is a roadmap. So use the report as a step-by-step guide and adjust over time. You don't have to do everything at once. Don't do everything at once. I recommend people, like, again, you start from the beginning, you make the changes. When that becomes a habit, then you make the next change. If you try to do a 180, most people end up not sticking with it because it's too much. So give yourself grace and patience and do one step at a time until it becomes a habit. Support, work with a practitioner for safe, personalized guidance. I always think that's a great idea. And with the power of the genetics, like I can tell you from my practice, I went from working with people for months and months and months on end to doing the genetic testing and having a clear pathway and direction to go, so that it's streamlined healing for them and it speeded it up, and it saved them frustration, and it saved them time, and it saved them money, not only on supplements, because just guessing, the test will let you know which the best supplements, what forms would be best for you, but also dietary changes. Instead of let's try this way of eating, let's try this now we know what direction to go as far as diet. And you see the results so much faster when you have this information. It's also motivating and empowering, because when you know this and you see it in black and white, it's so much easier to stick with it, because you know that is your unique body and your body is going to function the best based on your unique DNA. And so it's very empowering, very motivating, not scary at all, because knowing this information empowers you to, the goal is hopefully prevent, reverse, or improve any disorder or disease. So what's next? Connect with a practitioner, book a consult with one of our practitioners to review test results. And you can find that on the directory on MaxGen's website. There's also resources that I was mentioning some of them, but there's articles on the website that has a lot of great information that explains a lot of things. So that's like their blog. The YouTube videos are great. The Q&As will be posted on there also, but there's also Practitioner of the Month, where they deep dive in specific genetics, which is specific gene pathways, which is awesome. And there's podcasts that are available on the website and on social media accounts. So you can stay connected with us. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and or ask to join the email list, which I recommend, because anytime they put out a new article, you'll get that, and also keep you up to date on anything new that's going on.
Right. Thank you, Debbie, for sharing your insights with us today. We are always accepting questions, submissions on topics you would like us to cover. You can DM us, email us, and stay tuned for future webinars. Thank you so much.